I did a poll in my Facebook boxing group, Hatman Boxing, a couple months back, and I asked the question, will the Deontay Wilder-Tyson Fury rematch happen next? As in, will they fight each other next as opposed to other opponents? Now, when I did this poll, the two sides were still in negotiations. The WBC had ordered the fight, but the negotiations had started to become quite drawn out, and a lot of people were becoming skeptical about whether the fight was going to happen. So in the poll, from what I can remember, about, 55% said no, the fight's not going to happen next. And maybe 45% said yes, it will happen next. I could be off on the exact percentages, but I think it was there or thereabouts. It was a fairly closely contested poll. And of the people who said yes, it's going to happen next, they were quite vocal, many of them. And they were saying, oh, you guys are all drama queens and, you're being all melodramatic. It's going to happen next. The WBC's ordered it. Frank Warren said it's happening. Tyson Fury said it's happening, so it's happening. That's how they were carrying on. But other people, as I say, because the negotiations were protracted and because they don't necessarily believe that Tyson Fury or Frank Warren's word are their bond, they were a little more skeptical about whether it would happen next. And now we've found out that those people who were skeptical were correct. The people who didn't take Fury and Warren's word as gospel were correct. Then we had the ESPN announcement a few weeks later, maybe a week or so later. I can't remember now the exact distance between the two polls, but a few weeks later, we had the ESPN announcement. And in the immediate aftermath of this announcement, both Tyson Fury and Frank Warren were still carrying on as if the Deontay Wilder fight was going to happen next. In the immediate aftermath of the announcement, that's what they were saying. In fact, Tyson Fury said the Wilder fight will be easier to make now, which contradicts what most of us felt. We felt like actually the ESPN deal is going to make the Wilder rematch more difficult, but he was saying, no, it's going to make it easier. So I did a poll again at this point, asking the question, will the Deontay Wilder-Tyson Fury rematch happen in 2019 at all? Are we even going to see it this year at all? The majority of people in the poll said no, we're not going to see it in 2019. But it was still, I guess a sizable minority. The poll wasn't as close this time around, but it was a sizable minority who said, yeah, it's still going to happen in 2019. Well, it appears the debate has been settled now because Tyson Fury's new co-promoter, Bob Arum, has come out and said the fight is indeed not happening in 2019. That it won't happen until early 2020, assuming it happens at all. So I'm going to quote Bob Arum here. He says, assuming Fury wins this fight against Tom Schwartz, he'll have another appearance in the United States. Then hopefully next year in February, he'll end up fighting Wilder. Their idea is to have Wilder fight twice on their platform and then to get together to do a pay-per-view fight. ESPN is just a distributor. It may well be that Wilder also has a network involved. They may want to share the distribution in some way with ESPN, and that is something we've done before. So there's Bob Arum talking about the fight not happening until 2020, and also talking about the possibility of a cross-network fight where both ESPN and potentially Showtime or Fox air the fight simultaneously. That's been done before. We saw it, for example, with Lennox Lewis when he fought Mike Tyson. He goes on to talk about his opinion on the scoring of the first Wilder Fury fight. He talks about the officials, making sure that they're going to be mutually agreed officials. And finally, he talks about Tom Schwartz, the confirmed opponent for Tyson Fury. He says here, we wanted to get a guy who hadn't tasted a loss. Tyson is such a big guy. We didn't want to put him in with a small guy, and Schwartz is a big guy. It will make a really compelling fight. He was quite willing to take the fight. The terms were negotiated, and the idea that he wanted to and is able to fight Tyson Fury, this was never in doubt. Now, again, I'm not being so harsh on Tyson Fury picking Tom Schwartz when I put Tyson Fury's actions into historical context, because I know, being around boxing and following the sport for so many decades, I know that many of the great champions of the past have picked easy touches. Now, Tyson Fury isn't a belt holder, but he's calling himself the lineal champion for whatever it's worth. And I know that top contenders, lineal champions, and great legitimate champions who hold belts in the past have taken on soft touches. They've gone from fighting an elite fighter to fighting, an also not even a has-been, and never was sometimes. Where Tyson Fury, I think, does deserve the criticism he's getting is the fact that he's talked himself up so much. That's the problem. If Tyson Fury was just, an AJ kind of character who doesn't really boast and brag that much, doesn't really trash talk that much unless provoked. If he was that kind of character, I don't think there would be quite as many people having a go at him for taking on a Tom Schwartz's of the world. But when you big yourself up to the nth degree, when you call yourself the only real champion, when you're constantly trashing and dumping on the other so-called champions, and then you go and fight Tom Schwartz, you turn down the Wilder rematch to go fight Tom Schwartz, understandably, you're going to come in for a lot of criticism. So from that perspective, I get it. Fury talking himself up and then fighting Schwartz, I get it. You've got every right to criticize him. But as I say, from a historical context, when it comes to, champions in previous eras fighting top level opposition and then coming down and fighting like a weak voluntary, it's happened a lot. I mean, there was a time in boxing when it was quite common for champions to fight non-title fights in between title defenses. That was very common. You go back and look at the history books, you'll see what I'm saying. Julio César Chávez Sr., by the way, was one of the people who used to do that. Roberto Durán used to do that. Who else am I thinking of now? Roberto Durán, Julio César Chávez Sr., James Toney even used to do that. You go look at James Toney's record, you'll find non-title bouts in between title defenses. Okay? Now, in that situation there, you can have a bit more sympathy because you say, okay, he's just keeping warm. His title's not even on the line. It's just a tune-up. He's going around the country, staying active, fighting these obscure fringe contenders and journeymen just to let people see him around the country in different parts of the nation. But to be putting a fight on and calling it a world heavyweight title fight or a world title fight against a poor opponent, that's not on. And that is what Tyson Fury is doing here with Tom Schwartz. So I can see there is a bit of a difference in that regard. But again, even with legitimate world title fights that were for belts, there are champions who've done it before. I mean, you look at Riddick Bowe, when he first became heavyweight champion after beating Evander Holyfield, he beat an elite guy in Holyfield. His first defense was against Michael Dokes. Now, Michael Dokes was a former heavyweight champion, but he was way, way, way over the hill. He was, overweight. He'd been suffering with, substance issues outside of the ring, and he didn't last very long against Riddick Bowe. It was a very short fight. And then, after that, he fought Jesse Ferguson, who was coming off a decent win against Ray Mercer, but again, he wasn't an elite heavyweight. This was a time when Riddick Bowe had the opportunity to fight Lennox Lewis. Rather than fight Lewis, he threw his WBC belt in the trash and fought the Michael Dokeses of the world and the Jesse Fergusons instead of Lennox Lewis. But Riddick Bowe today isn't as well known by boxing fans as Lewis, Tyson, Holyfield, etc., in terms of the newer generation of boxing fans. But he's still quite highly regarded. People look at Riddick Bowe and say, oh, he was good, Riddick Bowe. He had a lot of potential. But the guy who had a lot of potential was, fighting lower tier opposition when he became champion. And I know Jesse Ferguson was a decent fringe contender, but and Michael Dokes was a former champion, but trust me, at the time, Michael Dokes was so over the hill, it wasn't even funny. And that's why the fight didn't last long. And Jesse Ferguson, as I say, solid fringe contender, but that's all he was, a fringe contender. You know, lost more than his fair share of fights, Jesse Ferguson. And by the time he fought Riddick Bowe, he wasn't in particularly great shape from what I remember in that fight. He got knocked out, I think it was the second round. And obviously you've got, you know, the examples I've given many times before. Michael Spinks when he was lineal champion. George Foreman when he was lineal champion. I mean, Lennox Lewis, when Lewis was WBC champion, his first reign, his first defense of the title was against Tony Tucker. Second defense, Frank Bruno. Third defense, Phil Jackson. Fourth defense, Oliver McCall. I mean, these weren't exactly the top of the top, cream of the crop. Yeah, Frank Bruno, you know, decent contender over the years. Tony Tucker had only had one loss to Tyson, but he'd been out, you know, out of the elite bracket in the heavyweight division for a while because he'd been suffering from, again, substance abuse problems. And he was kind of old by the time he fought Lennox Lewis. What was he? Maybe like 34, 35 when he fought Lewis? So he wasn't one of the elite guys at the time. Frank Bruno, you know, top 10 heavyweight, but not elite. Phil Jackson certainly wasn't elite. Phil Jackson really was an obscure heavyweight who Lennox Lewis fought. Then he fought Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall was described by the press, by the boxing press, as a journeyman when Lennox Lewis fought him. Being real. Lewis's resume was really built after that first loss to Oliver McCall. He did have the nice win over Razor Ruddock, who was an elite heavyweight at the time. And that was a final eliminator for the WBC. But after that, Lewis wasn't fighting the cream of the crop. He was trying to fight Riddick Bowe, obviously. It's not his fault that fight didn't happen. He wanted to fight Tommy Morrison, who was, you know, one of the better known heavyweights in the world at the time. But that fight fell through because Tommy Morrison got knocked out by Michael Bent. But yeah, Lewis's Hall of Fame resume was primarily built after his first loss to Oliver McCall. He came back. He fought Lionel Butler, who was out of shape, beat Butler. Then he fought Justin Fortune. Then he fought Tommy Morrison, finally, and beat Morrison. And that was a good win for him. And on it went from there. He rematched Oliver McCall. He got the WBC belt. He fought people like, he fought Ray Mercer. Before then, he fought Morrison and Mercer. Fought McCall, got the WBC belt back. And, you know, the rest is history. Fought the likes of Zelko Mavrovich. He fought Shannon Briggs. He fought Henry Akinwande. He fought Andrew Galotta. He fought Holyfield twice, obviously. Hasim Ratman, Mike Tyson, David Tua, Vitaly Klitschko, etc., etc. So that's really when the legacy was built. But his early days as champion, he wasn't really fighting the greatest opposition out there. Let's be real. Again, it wasn't all down to his doing. It wasn't all his fault, but, you know, it is what it is. Phil Jackson certainly was a voluntary defense for Lennox Lewis. You know, I'm sure there are stronger opponents he could have picked out of the top 10 than Phil Jackson. So anyway, let me not long this video out too much. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about the fact that Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury is not going to happen until at least 2020, if it happens at all. Let me know how you feel about that in the comments, people. It's happening. I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.